Here we are back at ESPC24 and in Stockholm, and welcome. Thanks for coming and talking and sharing about your session. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot. So my name is Olena Borzenko. I gave a session yesterday about ethics considerations in AI. I think I got a really good feedback. I think it's a very important topic to discuss. So thanks for having me for this interview.
It's great to talk about this. I think one of my observations as Microsoft started talking about Copilot and getting in and talking about the broader AI topics, it was like 2 years ago. First and foremost, out in front of that, they talked about the ethics of AI. I thought it was great, and it's part of that, I think, is because as a community, certainly on the collaboration side, we all kind of got burned by like the questions of security and the data quality questions. So kind of all of those things which kind of led to it. And so they anticipated that was going to be the first question asked about AI. Mm-hmm. So kind of what did you cover?
Well, I think I tried to cover as many aspects as I could. So not only covering the aspects of what makes the AI responsible and explainable, but also bringing some examples and some incidents. So basically just raising the awareness about the whole ethics in AI topic. I think what you said actually that you got from the beginning a lot of questions, but do you get the same amount of questions now after like 2 years of really like explosion of ChatGPT, for example?
Well, that's one of the, if you look at the adoption curve with companies, is the part of the problem that happens is people then say, well, no, I've got this. I understand the ethics side. It's like, but do you?
Yeah.
Do you really? So it kind of gets into, I always like to hear, especially from people that are presenting actively on a topic, like what kinds of questions, how has that changed? What are you now hearing from companies?
I can bring very simple example of why people don't really understand the ethics in AI that well. I ask a very simple question. How many of us chatting with ChatGPT actually ask question back? Where do you get your data? Do you have is your data biased? How do you make a decision? What's the decision-making process? If you ask those questions to ChatGPT, it will honestly tell you the answers. Yes, the data that I have can be biased, and explain certain steps of decision making. But it's kind of like raising the awareness and gives you understanding that okay, maybe I should not rely on all the information from ChatGPT that well.
Well, so I can say honestly, because you can come to my session tomorrow. I'm doing a session where I'm actually going to be sharing some of my favorite prompts that I use, and one of them is a validation prompt. It's basically challenging the AI to say, what are the facts that you answered this question with?
Exactly.
Where did you get those? So you can actually, when it responds, and I build a prompt, so I build a GPT or an agent that can go in and do this, that every time I ask it for information or a question on whatever it is, it provides its response. And then part of that I say, with every response, outline the data points that you're basing your answer off of. So you can then go and validate the responses, say, yes, those are correct, and then validate that those responses were in the answer that was provided.
And that's very important, but I'm pretty sure not everyone does this.
Nobody does that.
I think, right. I think it's actually, there's these 3 key points that I try to highlight in my presentation. The first thing that we need to understand about AI and data sets and all the stuff, there is a lot of bias and discrimination that is really injected and inherited in all our data, right? So there is one thing. The second thing is we have a lack of transparency and accountability for all the outputs and results from the AI. So we don't understand. That's really often that AI models, they operate as black boxes.
Right.
So we don't know how the decision is being made. And it's really important to understand and being able to trace the results, right? So there is a responsible AI when you actually make put a lot of effort in making the process of decision making responsible and making sure there's no biased data and making sure that you have all the groups, all the information, even from underrepresented groups, present. And there is a second aspect when you take the results, the outputs, and that's the explainable AI. And you ask yourself, what brought the algorithm to this decision? Is that the correct one? So one is a preparation and in process, and the second one is checking the outcome and and asking yourself, why did I get this outcome? If that's actually really what I wanted, if that's unbiased result. So there is two parts of those, and the third one which is really big, and that's what we already talked about. People don't ask the right questions. People don't know what questions to ask. So it's an education aspect. If you're adopting technology as an AI, and it's an AI in general, it's not a new technology, but the tools that were released, they're quite new, quite powerful, and we don't know or don't understand how to use them properly. So education, asking the right questions, making sure that you're actually getting the information from the right sources or getting the references to the source of the information is really important, I think.
I know that there are people that have commented that there needs to be some kind of attribution data point, so metadata, for example, to be able to identify, hey, this response, this piece came from AI versus the human input. Almost like when you go to a web page and you can click to look at the code of the page and the outline, that you'd be able to toggle on and be able to look at the response, and it would give you some of the workflow, some of the logic of where that data came from. Maybe there's an opportunity for a partner to go and do that, for Microsoft to go and build something like that shows you where this generated.
You mean you want to understand what part of the content and the resources are AI generated?
I'm saying other people are asking for that ability to go and see that.
Okay.
Like, as a marketer, I don't care. If it's providing the right answer, it's a good data. I don't care whether it was human or AI generated for that. But I mean, the reality, as a writer, I also realize that at least today, like, I can usually identify what is AI generated content over human. It feels inauthentic.
I think that's an aspect of copyright. That's the fun thing. And the second thing, if you have some, for example, emotional aspect in the content that you generate, maybe that's can be touchy story or something.
Right.
You want to be sure that this story is actually a real one and not just someone is using clever AI prompts and generating some text that can touch the feelings and so on. This is just, I think, unnecessary and creates a lot of fakeness in our
It's one of the
society.
reasons why I'm very interested in, just like in the last decade, I'd say the last 15 plus years, everything I've written has been in OneNote. I'm a heavy OneNote user. So the first thing I thought of was to be able to get Copilot for OneNote. More importantly, be able to build like a SharePoint Copilot that's personal, that I can have looking at my blog, looking at my OneNote, looking at all of my content, and then start generating answers based on my knowledge that I've collected, my writings, my voice, my tone, all of those other things. And is it plagiarism when you're drawing only upon your own content?
I don't think so. There's also the same thing with generating the blog posts and articles and the abstracts or something. The one thing, if you say, I want to create a session about this or that, or I want to write a magazine article and you have a great idea, but for example, English might be not your first language. You might have a struggle there, and it's totally fine to get help from tools, right? But the one thing is when you ask and generate me an article, and the second thing, when you provide a lot of context, here is my draft, here is my thoughts, here is my yada yada, and then you say, help me shape it.
Right.
That's your thing.
Right.
And that was altered or edited by a tool and not completely generated content just based on your idea.
Which is also what I'm going to be talking about, this
information.
exact thing in my session tomorrow around content for that. But and people just, like any new technology, you need to understand this is what it does, this is how it works, this is how it goes outside of your body of knowledge, outside of your company. So if it's the web context or if it's your company enterprise context for that, and how you leverage that. I use it as an idea generation. I talk about, I'm going to share the example. Another favorite prompt is using the outline extender. So it's adding on logically from other pieces. And about 50% of what it generates of no, not even close. Or other was oh yes, that is something I want to go and cover. But it's building the outline, and then you go and add your words, you add your content into that thing. But the other thing I love doing is, to your other point, is I would take a finished draft, a full draft of an article, and I'm clean this up. Logically, the flow, doing that. And so it's really good at that for, again, speeding up the process of delivery. Can I do it on my own? Yes, but it might take me a couple hours to whittle through, and I might still miss some things versus minutes to get that organized.
But I think before getting to that point of spending minutes versus hours, you do need to invest some time to understand how the content is. For example, we all know now when we read some text, there are some words that are clearly highlighting and showing that it was AI generated. Like in the era of, and like harnessing
the word delve keeps showing up in every...
Like we all delving into
Correct.
something. So I think it's very important to first understand what kind of result you might get. Second, compare it to the result that you want to get. For example, what I do sometimes, I just write things in Ukrainian. Because I'm from Ukraine, this is my native language. I write things in Ukrainian, and I try to understand contextually what do I want to say here. I don't use translator. I say it, I post my notes or my thoughts, and I say, well, help me shape it in English, but make sure to keep the same contextual or like semantic and meaning. And if I'm not happy with the result, I always ask for synonyms. Like, can you provide me some alternatives? Can I use different words? Why do you use this one over that one? It's very important to understand those key things. This brings you to the point, as you said, you always want to know where the information is coming from. So that's the building the rules and guardrails around your output. So that's also one of the aspects. One thing is saying, tell me where you got this information. Second thing is saying, okay, I want an output to be in a certain way, and please don't use those words, and please shape it in a certain way, providing the guardrails, the safe words, and yada yada. So I think this is also very important. But we didn't get instruction when ChatGPT was released. So we have a documentation, of course, but it was publicly available, and there was a lot of things that being generated. And I see, especially in like Instagrams from social medias, a lot of tools were created with the AI. And we as developers, I look at it and I'm like, no, please don't do that. It's so bad. We understand that it's so bad because we spent quite some time in exploring and understanding how to work with that, and now we kind of learned. Still, I don't think that we all understand it that well. Like all of us really like doing the perfect job with sending the correct prompts.
It takes practice, and I always the way that I phrase it, I said we need to develop healthy habits around how to use the different tools. It's a different way of it's like anything. It's just it's a different language, it's a different method of getting work done, and so you need to get out of your bad habits into the new habits, and so phrasing, structuring it. I can't remember what the the acronym that like Donna Sarkar used to describe to go in and do that, but have the goal in mind of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bunch of guidance that's out there. There's some better content than others of how to write a good prompt. But like I always make sure that I'm asking the Copilot to act as an expert in this, or this is the scope of this. Here's my role. This is what my desired output is. This is the content that I have. Here's what I'm asking for help on to go and do. And I get much better, more detailed responses. And I can see when you go back and look at, and usually the way that I do it, when I write, like I will write what I call stream of consciousness writing, just get the ideas out, don't self-edit, just get the things out there that I want to say. And then I go back and I look at the next version of that, and you see all of my content that I generated, but it just becomes more organized. It becomes like the flow. It moves pieces around. Okay, yes, I would have done that eventually, but it just speeds up that process.
It takes you way too much time. Yeah, no, that's completely right. Yeah.
So there's a lot to learn. I mean, do you point anybody to like resources out there to get educated on kind of the ethical use of, or? I
bring a lot of examples to the research papers, and especially highlighting, for example, one of the biggest topics is healthcare. How many people were mistreated, especially during COVID times, because of the wrong data sets and yada. So I do bring a lot of research papers and examples in my session. I do bring different approaches, for example, copyrights in art and owners of the creative pieces, because art is also my hobby. So it is kind of a topic that is interesting for me, how to protect the things that I'm creating. And of course I'm being inspired and I'm getting the references to some other artists, but I'm not taking it and copying it with the AI and saying this is my thing. So I'm also providing some tools and steps how you can protect your...
Well, a lot of people, like, even in the written word, people just don't understand how to do the proper citations, how to do the right references for that. So that's a great area to go and train people. Say, look, when you are, leaning on this content or accessing this or sharing quotes or whatever that is, properly cite those works.
Yeah.
Like, here's the way that you go and do that. So it's almost like going back to middle school and to like, here's the way to go and write a white paper. Here's the way to do your references and citations around that. Just be thinking of is if I'm drawing on these other sources, here's how to properly cite those.
Yeah, there is multiple aspects. So if you're just talking about text generation, then of course you need to write a correct system prompt telling what do you expect the result, the outcome, and always ask to get the references for the data, always set the right guardrails. This is one aspect of this. And then when you come into content generation or like image generation, then there is of course the whole other area about it, right? Like marking your images that they AI generated, because some of them can be really photorealistic. And it was, for example, the disaster happened, the Hurricane Helene. There was a couple of images of a sobbing child was released, with a puppy sitting on a board, and that created a lot of stress and fear to families. Because of course, if you have a family, if you have a kid, you will be afraid for that. And it was completely fake thing. It was just generated. Someone thought it's a great idea to do this when such strategy happened to post the images of a crying child on a boat.
Well, I think it was a decision was just made in the U.S. and so I don't know what other countries are doing around this, where it said like for artwork, for example, we're not going to copyright or put the standard protections over the artwork created purely digital that's derived through AI, because they say there's components that are coming from other sources that are protected, therefore we cannot protect this thing.
That's also what I'm highlighting in my session, that there is no copyrights for AI-generated content because there is no actual human factor to this.
Right.
And I think it's fair, because you cannot copyright something if you say, generate me an image in Van Gogh style.
Right.
This is not your copyright. Sit, do it, put a lot of effort in learning, create this piece, and then copyright it. Then it's gonna be yours. There was also about this piece that won a prize in a digital art category that was generated with a Midjourney, and that's created a lot of issues around it. Like, you just generated.
I think that was the one that I saw the news around. But what if you have then the AI powering a robot that's using a physical paintbrush to actually do it?
It's still you still have the same. You still can have, like, if you're talking about that, this is the realization of a piece. But then there is a sketch, so you need to create a sketch, right? And then the robot can realize it. It's very similar to plotting art. You can have a plotter machine, CNC machine, which you tell how it's going to move, where it's going to move, when it's going to put a pen down and up. And it's going to print you, well, basically draw you with a pen, with a pencil, doesn't really matter whatever you say, but you need to create...
But it has to have the input for that, correct.
The input.
Right.
So who creates this input? I think this is a very interesting question. This is a very important question.
There's 1,000 monkeys on 1,000 typewriters. And generating AI and creating art. I think that's going to be the model.
I know that because the art that I'm doing is partially was like manually acrylics and was all different colors and everything. But I also use a CNC machine to create some graphics on top of it. And I spend a lot of time in learning 3D Max and AutoCAD and other stuff and other tools to learn how to do sketches. I don't ask AI do this for me, because I have my ideas and I want to realize them. I want this to be mine.
Yep.
Right?
No, I know. It's like, be careful out there, folks, because it's confusing right now. There are a lot of changing rules in different regions depending on what you're creating. But yeah, it's so one of the reasons I say this over and over again, that I think that Copilot is brilliant marketing, the naming of Copilot. It is a co-pilot, not the pilot. It requires the human element. I think that is going to be the reality. Like, I've had some arguments with some Microsoft people, like a good friend, Naomi Moneypenny at Microsoft. A few years back, we had a conversation about when there will be like the moment when AI becomes self-aware and all that. And I believe it's a lot further out, if it ever happens. I take that perspective versus hers, but
That's that's the topic of people being threatened by AI. Like people used to be threatened by robotics,
Okay.
and now people are afraid that they will take their jobs. Like for example, I'm a software developer. I would be afraid that AI will take my job. I don't think so. But still,
I'm not afraid of AI. I do think it's all black magic, but I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah, but the thing is that statistically, there was some numbers actually mentioned that there is this 30, the number says that around 80 million of jobs will be taken because of AI, but 93 or
Will be
like 70
created.
slash
Right.
130
Be
will be
created.
created.
Right, I know.
So what it means that we have to have a human in loop because the human has to validate the outputs and make
Right.
sure that all the outcomes are correct and valid and unbiased.
Yeah.
But it will take some jobs and routine tasks away from us, which is, I think, is a good thing. And you need
Right.
to embrace the learning curve and put yourself in a position that you will be useful with a new step in your generation.
I look at it as an opportunity. I don't look at it as a negative thing. It was very much like the cloud. Moving in the cloud was the same thing. It was more opportunity that came out of it than jobs that went away.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's a nice. This also was something I'm mentioning on my session. AI was created without our consent, and that's a quote that I got from the interview. Listen, to this. The interview of one of my favorite singers, Aurora. She's a Norwegian singer. She's saying that not because, oh my God, we didn't agree to this, but she's saying this because the truth has never been easier to manipulate, never been easier to share, and has never been easier to manipulate. Because we got this without our consent, we don't understand how to work with this properly, we don't understand how the decision being made, and we're putting way too much trust in AI. How many friends do I have that say, "Oh, I will ask ChatGPT," and they just believe 100% everything that ChatGPT says?
That's something that Donna Sarkar mentioned this morning in her keynote, where she talked about, which is very important. It's like if you're getting out ahead of it now and understanding how the technology works, you don't have to be an expert in all things AI. But if you understand the fundamentals of how it learns, how you utilize that, what you can do, you will have a competitive advantage over the people around you, and you'll understand better how to adapt to the technology.
I think there's a very big difference between putting a little bit of effort, understanding how it works, and being there and not being there. Very big gap in the results, outcomes, and how you can use those tools versus very little effort being put in actually getting there.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for walking us through in detail. Of course, you can go and find all of Lena's session, the details that are out there if you were here. And
presentation is there. It has a lot of slides, there's a lot of information, so please go check it out.
Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much.